Hello everybody, welcome to RPG Horror Stories. Only gigachads like, comment, and subscribe. So, let's get on with the stories, and hopefully you've got some big dick energy, babe. High school DM calls my first character overpowered and accuses me of cheating because he doesn't know how the game works. So, I've always had a really vested interest in fantasy games my entire life, but somehow Dungeons & Dragons just kind of slipped my radar. Mostly because I didn't have actual friends until high school. That gets into where this story goes, because my school started a gaming club and I was all over that shit. Fast forward a bit, and it's me and roughly 6 other people that are pretty new to the game sitting at the table and working with our dungeon master. We were playing 5th edition, which was pretty easy to grasp in my case. I already knew what I wanted to play, because I had spent years working on a fantasy character outside of D&D that fit the mold very well. I ended up playing a half-elf Oath of Ancients paladin, whose other half was orc, not human. Never came up in gameplay, just an aesthetic and lore choice. Things go fine for a while, and I enjoy the experience, but the Dungeon Master becomes increasingly more and more frustrated with my character, and begins to constantly question every action I make or punish me for it. For example, in one roleplay scene, I stated before we took off on another quest my character would do the stereotypical knight pointing his sword on a horse pose, but the Dungeon Master made my character fall off his horse and into the mud. On another, the DM was shocked at how high my 2-hit bonus was for attacks and straight up accused me of cheating. I explained in detail how I got my mods, and the Dungeon Master was confused that proficiency applied to attacks, then said that I specifically was no longer allowed to do that. Fine, whatever. I go along with it because I enjoy the new friends I've made, and I knew coming into this that Dungeons & Dragons is kind of at the Dungeon Master's mercy for better or for worse. That is, until we're in combat again, and I go for my extra attack. I just leveled up, and I pump smites into it. At this point, the Dungeon Master brings everything to an halt and demands an explanation for how I did everything. Once again, I give him the rundown on my 2 attacks and how smites work to show I'm not cheating, but the Dungeon Master is just over it now. He ends up combat half-heartedly by saying, "Congratulations, you won, you kill all the goblins." I left the club shortly after this and started playing Dungeons & Dragons online over Discord, which was most assuredly a better experience. I didn't really bother to keep in contact with the Dungeon Master, but I still know quite a few of the players from back then and stay in touch. Thankfully, D&D wasn't completely ruined for me, but I just don't understand stuff like this, man. I feel bad for anyone that played with this Dungeon Master and had the game completely ruined for them because a guy couldn't bother to look in a PHP instead of arguing about the basic mechanics of attacks. Him accusing me of cheating is delirious to think about. I mean, because all he had to do was open one of the 5 separate PHPs at the table and prove himself wrong. But he instead chose to lash out and act like a child because of his toxic perception of how the game is supposed to run. Okay, so for those of you who have been in my channel for a while, I kind of run things with like rules chaos, as some people might say it, but I call it rules as fun. I rule everything differently depending on how fun it is. And I strongly believe that whether you're playing rules as written or rules as intended, you should still err on the side of the more fun ruling. This is just a dude with a god complex inserting himself into the Dungeon Master seat, refusing to do any of the work, and then getting pissed off when he didn't TPK the party. Don't do this. I'm very glad that you were able to find better groups shortly after this. And this is a really cool character concept. I am so fucking angry that I didn't get to hear more about it. It's such a fucking cool character concept. How D&D got my aunt completely cut off from my family. So I've only ever done Dungeons & Dragons with my family, usually comprising of my mom, stepfather, brother, and step-sibling. Our campaign is pretty decently fun, and there are hardly any arguments about it. My aunt also has a family of D&D campaigns comprising of her, my uncle, and my cousins. One night, I and my mom decided we might join them for a dungeon. It went very well. It was also very fun. So you might be wondering, where's the problem? Well, it all comes down to my step-siblings' gender. They are agender. I'm going to spare you the details, but my aunt has acted terribly towards them ever since they came out. She banned her daughter from using my siblings' preferred names and pronouns, and just generally shits on them whenever their name is brought up. Sometimes, she straight up lied about my siblings' behavior, lying about my sibling forcing gayness onto her daughter. However, my mom decided to excuse the behavior since she and my aunt were very close. One day, my aunt had the idea of having us join her campaign every other week or so. And she and her daughter do the same with ours. At first, this seemed like an okay idea. Well, rightfully so, my stepdad, the dungeon master of our campaign, decides after hearing me complain about my aunt's rants that she should not be allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons with us. His reasoning was that it was our family D&D time where we were having fun. My siblings shouldn't have to put up with her when we're supposed to be having fun. Mind you, our aunt was okay to come over and just hang out with my mom or for holidays. He was not banned from the house. Well, being informed of this, my aunt flipped her shit. She ripped into us for being sensitive because we didn't want her constantly hitting on a literal 14-year-old while they were right there to listen. In my mom's conversation with her over text, she ended up outing my identity as well. I'm a closeted trans guy. Only my immediate family knows. Cousins, aunts, uncles, they hadn't been planned to be clued in for a while. I wasn't going to come out to them, especially after hearing my aunt rant on and on and on about how trans people are selfish. So that was an amazing experience. At the end of it all, my mother ended up completely blocking my aunt, uncle, and cousin. We haven't spoken to any of them since. It's probably been a month since it happened. My mom also deleted all of her social media, completely cut off my aunt, and is no longer my baby cousin's godmother. She even cut off the baby. It's kind of funny. It's probably for the best that this happened, considering that there were some very, very weird things I just never thought about beforehand. My cousin played a slave-owning albino drow and was extremely weird about it, so yeah, that was another thing. I know some of my family members might see this, so hi, I guess. I don't feel bad about sharing this, honestly. I'm not even sure if this is D&D enough to share here. I mean, it did all start from it, even if it wasn't something that happened in-game. Whatever. I just needed to get it off my chest. I don't even care if mods remove it. I just want to talk about how upset it made me, especially being outed. Too long didn't read. Aunt was banned from D&D for transphobia, and it spiraled into her being banned from talking to us at all. Okay, well, there's not much I can say on this situation aside from bravo. You guys handled this surprisingly well. That said, just a little bit of a forenote, it's gonna be slightly political here. When it comes down to it, old Christian people define basically anything that they don't like as a sin, and therefore, they hate anyone who doesn't do stuff that they like or that does stuff that they don't like, which is why you don't want Christians in office, because they genuinely believe, abortion is a sin, despite the fact that there is actually a section within their very own Bible about how, when, and where to do abortion, and explicitly saying it is not a sin. There's also nothing related to being a transgender person in the Bible for the most part, but they label that as a sin. Why? Because they're old people, and they don't like that people can change their bodies. They don't like the idea of there being more than two genders. And trust me, there are more than two genders. People don't realize it, but there is intersex. You can literally be born with the sex organs of both genders. And no matter what, you have to transition to one or the other. Otherwise, you're going to end up with gender dysphoria the entirety of your life. Like, You can be born with female parts and a prostate. That is a thing. You can be born with fucking guy parts and no prostate. It's intersex. It's a common thing. Look it up. And it is empirical proof of there being more than two genders, which is something that absolutely ruins the worldview of literally every Christian that I have ever met. That said, me personally, I think you could call me like satanic temple Satanist, you know, facts, logic, science, and deny the Christians their theological right to rule by using the very same arguments that they're using. That sort of thing. Now, that's all I have for today. Much love. Stay sexy. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye!